Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Future Baseball GM's YouTube channel. Today, I'd like to welcome our guest, Eli Steinfield. He is the development coach for the Baltimore Orioles. Welcome, Eli.
Hey, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me and looking forward to chatting a little bit today.
Awesome. Yeah, no. So just to start off, can you give our listeners just a brief rundown of who Eli Steinfield is and how he got to where he is today?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm originally from Dallas and I went to Indiana for undergrad, helped out with their baseball team for 3 years. That was before a lot of college teams started to get the tech in place, whether that's a Rapsodo or a track band unit. We didn't have that while I was there. So it was a lot of on field stuff and getting a feel for how a competitive environment works, how they go through a practice, what coaches expect from their players, and learned a lot from that. Really glad I did that. It's kind of a great way to start if you don't play collegiately, just to work with the collegiate team in some form or fashion. So that's what I did. Really learned a lot from it, and I've been lucky enough to intern with the Tigers in a scouting capacity at the amateur level. And then I've done a video internship with the Mets and then the Astros in 2019. And then I got hired in the fall by the Orioles to be a development coach. I was supposed to be at Norfolk this year in AAA, but yeah, that didn't really happen.
Yeah.
So that's okay. We're all working remotely and building up our process for next season, and really using this time to develop professionally. It's really sucked for a lot of people, but I think it's going to be really telling who comes out of it with better themselves, a better skill set, and that's something that the Orioles have really preached to us in keeping us cohesive, encouraging people to learn different things and ask questions at the end of the day. So that's a pretty short synopsis of my life. I've jumped around in some pretty part-time jobs in the way to where I got to. So I guess the moral of the story, to already jump into that, is even if you're not getting exactly where you want to be in the baseball industry, particularly when the job cycles are going to be backed up maybe for a year or two or even more potentially, uh, to not have that upward uh, path towards getting where you want to be is perfectly okay. I'm kind of to do that, and it's an interesting process, but you learn a lot and you have fun with it and you see what happens.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And, I think that's the biggest thing during this time. It's really challenging for everyone, and being able to just step outside your comfort zone, try something new. At the end of the day, a lot of our listeners, they want to get into the baseball industry, and that's their driving factor every day. Like, they're trying to do new things and learn different things. And I guess that brings me to my next point is like, why did you choose to want to work in baseball?
I got the sense pretty early on it was something I wanted to do. As I went through more internships, as I started kind of doing an internship with a minor league team on the business side, as all as that is to learn it, and I really think, particularly if you want to work on the baseball side, getting a first or two experience on the business side actually helps a lot, just so you understand kind of everything that goes into what makes a baseball team function, particularly when it's more of a mom and pop operation like a lot of minor league teams are. That was really helpful. I think for me, I always had a brain for it, knew that I wasn't going to play professionally, but I wanted to still be involved. And I think, like everybody, I didn't really see that being possible until I kind of saw Moneyball or read the book and saw that, hey, just because you played or did not play at a high level doesn't mean that you can't be a very contributing factor to a team either winning or losing, or players being more informed about one thing or another that they're doing or not doing. Um, I just realized that I didn't want to necessarily be in a desk job. I wanted to be helping people in some form or fashion. And baseball was kind of that medium. I thought, hey, this might be pretty cool. And, even in high school, I started writing handwritten letters to people in front offices saying, hey, I know I'm not eligible. I'm a high school student that's about to enter college. I'm just curious to learn more about what you did to get to where you are, what that process looks like, what the internship process looks like as you get more into college, because as I started talking to people in high school, you realize that they're not really hiring people for entry level roles or internship type roles until maybe you get halfway through your college career. So I knew I was a little bit ahead of the process, but just to sort of start laying that foundation is a really great way to do it. And I think a handwritten letter actually does go pretty far. A little bit tougher right now because of COVID, but it was something that I was doing, and it's still not a bad idea. I think what's tough about the written letter part right now is you can't really send them to stadiums, which is what I was doing, just because you just have no idea if these employees are working from home or actually going into stadiums most days.
Yeah, I think, that's something I actually started doing. After we have our guests on, I like to follow up with them and I send them, a thank you, whether it's electronically or physically, and not something I've ever done before, but I realize like it can go a long way in terms of building a relationship with someone. And I think, and as you are aware, our industry is very relationship based, and people that we meet kind of can help us get to the positions we want to get in eventually one day. And maybe can you talk a little bit about that and more of like the relationship building side that you kind of learned about throughout your career up to this point?
I think what you realize is you can tell, particularly when people reach out to me, and I think this is pretty rare because most people that are working baseball have a good sense of people. But there have been times where even I've done this, and looking back, I learned from it, but it wasn't the smartest thing at the time. Is to get into baseball, your goal should be number one, just to build relationships, however that looks. It's not, hey, I'm reaching out to you because I want a job. It's not, it's just not going to work. And I learned that the hard way when I was really young. But then as you get better at it, you realize, like, no, this person could be not only a great contact because they're a great person, but also because you can learn from them. And if you ask them questions, good people in baseball, which there's far more good people than there are people that may not be as willing, they love answering those questions. And I know I love answering those questions. And if I have questions, I'll either ask people with the Orioles that know more than me or people outside the organization. Um, Things like, hey, I'm not really aware of this. What do you know? Let's talk about it. And I can count maybe on a hand or two the people specifically that have been ridiculously encouraging, have told me, no, stick to this path you have, find ways to stick out a little bit. And ultimately, the best way to stick out is just to be personable, be caring. It's great if you have a coding skill or a tech related skill. But I get the sense, excuse me, that most teams are really looking for that people side first because that's what's got to play anyway. You have to be able to tell people that, hey, this is what we're seeing in the data. Here's how we're translating this into one or two bite-sized pieces. Um, and then you just kind of go from there. So I think it's just building that sense of being people centric, of knowing who your audience is, and at the end of the day, just knowing that you're just not going to know everything. Um, every day in my job, I know that I have a ton to learn. I mean, I'm starting out as a pretty young coach in an entry level role, and I just don't know everything, and that's okay. So I'm going to go ask people in the organization that know something, because then when somebody asks me down the road, then I can continue paying it forward, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I think the best phrase is like there's things you don't know that you just don't know. And like you said, that's okay. Like there's things I don't know that I just don't know. And that's the way it's going to be. And the same thing like you said, coding on my end is something that I'm trying to get better with, and learning Spanish. And that's kind of like a weakness of mine, but more, I think you could say this as well, like the strength for us is like, we have more experience on the technology side, how to, whether it's the simplest thing of setting it up, breaking it down, but then it's also, well, you're uploading the information, then you're able to break down the information and show it to a coach and explain it to them in terminology. So I think those are critically important as well. And as you had alluded to, relationship building, on my end, like I realized like it's I view the baseball industry as like a fraternity, and now with more females have joining the industry, there's a collaboration between a fraternity and sorority of one another. And I think it's just really interesting to see how how people are, opening their arms, you just reach out to them and it could go a long way, in terms of your career and progressing. But that's
Definitely.
great. That's great. And in terms of your current role at the Orioles for our listeners, can you kind of give them, a description of like what a development coach is and if I mean if we were in a normal year, kind of what your responsibilities would have been?
Yeah, so what happened is the Orioles were expanding their player development department last year and this year a decent amount. So for them, the way it works is that let's say we're looking at my affiliate for this year. So we have a manager, obviously, you have a pitching coach and a hitting coach. We have a fourth coach called a fundamentals coach who might have certain specialty on field, whether that's catching or outfield work or infield work. Not one hard and fast type thing, but just another on field coach. And then my role was a fifth coach called the development coach. And that means we are dealing with a lot of the analytics, whether it's advanced scouting, um, breaking down information, whether that's understanding a guy's trends on Rapsodo, if they're using that during the season. If their pitch shapes are a little bit off, we can relay that information to our pitching coach. Anything you can think of, basically. It's an open-ended role that they hired. There's either 5 or 6 of us. I'm blanking the exact number, but everybody's background is pretty different. We have 2 or 3 guys that are very good coders that can do it. We have somebody like myself that has a better understanding of the strength and conditioning side. And then we have former college coaches that have been hired. I think the Orioles just wanted to bring in an additional coach that understood the metrics a little bit, but they just wanted to bring in more people that had a good sense of humility. That's something that, like, I've learned and grown a ton with over my time in baseball, from being a kid who was just kind of happy to be there when I first got hired with the Tigers, and worked my butt off, but didn't really challenge myself the way I'm doing now. And that's just something I'm admitting because I'm aware of it and I know that I can get better, and have gotten better. I've changed my mindset a little bit. But they really weren't looking for one sort of thing here or there. It was, we want to bring in good people. How do you understand humility? How do you understand how to work with others? Um, Being okay with not credit for things, just because you're not getting uh, this public admiration or this acknowledgement, it doesn't mean that you're not valued. It's, you are contributing, and maybe that just doesn't get recognized sometimes, but people do notice. That's okay. It's being a cog in this big, really important piece that plays a major role that can only add on to it. So that's the role. It's a fifth coach role that's kind of a jack of all trades, but it's something that you could have a specialty with. Um, but it'll be interesting to see kind of what that looks like next year, because no one knows what the minor leagues are going to look like. I mean, the major leagues right now, they're trying to figure out kind of what to do, and it seems like that's kind of a process that's still in the works. And minor league baseball could look very different next year. None of us have any clue. Um, so it's really about using this time to learn and understanding, how can I do my job even better next year? What year looks like.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. And I think the position that you're in right now, due to all the uncertainty, I think we're going to see more positions like that if the clubs, if that club should want to do that. From my experience, with the Tigers, and the Orioles last year with the Orioles, they didn't have that role yet. But with the Tigers, they had those roles. And I think it's really helpful in my role as a baseball information assistant. It's kind of like a development coach role, but not so much like on field. So you're not throwing BP, you're not hitting fungos. So I think it's going to be really interesting over the next few years to see how organizations go about that process, if they haven't yet hired development coaches, because I think it's an important role. And even if it would be converting that minor league video position to a player development coach role.
Right. I think what's interesting about all of our development coaches, one of them baseball at a Division I school, the other one was basically a student, but he was doing a bunch of on-field stuff. So, and competitive high school baseball, and just didn't really have an interest in playing past that. I think what you'll notice is even though our development coaches didn't necessarily play at a high level, they all played competitively at some point so that if they need us to throw batting practice, we can do that. If they need us to hit fungos, we can do that. If they need us to coach first base or even third base, which, is possible, they're still trying to figure that out. That's something we could do too. So I think it's being able to kind of do a lot, but also realizing that you still have a lot to learn, but having some sort of playing background is really helpful because you can actually get an idea of what's kind of going on. But it's not, again, none of our development coaches played at a super high level. Some played D3, some played club baseball in college. Like they and they got that on field. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Like currently I'm coaching travel ball, right? And I played up till high school. I didn't play in college, but in the role like right now I'm coaching during a pandemic. It feels really weird. There's so many different adjustments, but I've had the opportunity to be a head coach right now as well, and making those decisions on the field is never an easy thing, right? Like there's risks they have to take, and at the end of the day, baseball is just a game, right? It's just about how the team, best prepares or goes about their competition with the information at the major league level and the minor league level that they have now. And
Yeah,
I think it's at the youth level, like travel ball, like they're going out and playing, right? Having fun. And you want to like winning isn't the most important thing at that level, right? It's more about developing, and you could almost say the same thing at the minor leagues. But when, in terms of, working with a program and an organization, like at the end of the day, winning is everyone's goal, right? So it's not always going to happen, but at the end of the day, that's what it is. And if you're not winning, you're not getting better, then you have to fix those inefficiencies to make sure your athletes are performing at the highest level that they can.
absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. And getting but what's interesting is my first coaching job was in 2017, and I coached the middle school team of the middle school slash high school that I used to go to. And before that, I didn't really have an interest in coaching, but I think it was more because it was something I didn't think I could do because the notion for a
Yeah.
long time, particularly in, kind of an archaic sport at times like baseball, is if you didn't play at a high level, you can't coach at a high level. And a guy like Kyle Bodie really pushed the notion of that's just not true. Does it help to have played at a high level? Yeah, but you can make up for it by just being really good at knowing the information and knowing how to coach things. And I think in like soccer, for example, that notion still isn't there in the same way. All the coaches out there played at a high level, but in baseball, I think that's definitely changing. I think even in the NBA, for example, a guy like Eric Spoelstra, I think he started out as a video assistant there after playing like D3 basketball or something, and now he's coached that team to multiple world championships. Like
Yeah.
it's not a prerequisite. You just work your
Right.
butt off and gain that information. Just ask a bunch of questions as you go.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's really interesting now how you see it, and you see more, I think MLB coaches coming from college ranks or coming from the lower ranks to have like training facilities, and because sports performance is becoming more critical, like the biomechanics side. We have like on base U training. There's force plates. There's so much more metrics now aligned with biomechanics that it's going to be really interesting over the next few years, kind of how we see that transition in terms of biomechanics.
Yep, that's where a lot of this is going. We hired a player performance coordinator this year named Ethan Stewart, who has a PhD, I think, in biomechanics. So that should
Yeah.
tell you something. That's kind of what's being valued right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, sports performance, like same thing at the Tigers. They hired someone within the last year or so where they have, a facility where they can go in there, go in the lab and focus on that kind of stuff where they could break down stuff on a force plate, break stuff down on a Rapsodo and kind of really break it down. Like, if guys come in from, from Rapsodo, or someone comes in from, another facility, kind of works with us, it's really helpful to kind of see, okay, well, this is how the player's moving. Maybe they're not moving correctly, they are moving correctly, but like they are moving. If they aren't moving correctly, like inefficiently, like how do we fix that so they are moving efficiently? So I think that's we'll see guys throughout the minor leagues maybe that weren't that quote unquote prospect, and then they will eventually, if they work along the lines what the staff has for them in terms of the information, then going forward, you never know. Like there could be a surprise figure from the organization in the big leagues.
Yeah, that's where that dollar amount in terms of surplus is, just drafting guys that maybe weren't valued as high, gaining them into your organization, and maybe working on some things that you couldn't see before. So if a guy has an inefficient sequence on his KVS metrics, which doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing sometimes, we could just see how much room does he have to kind of grow from that inefficiency, if you will. That's something that you're probably not sometimes familiar with the naked eye sometimes, and we can improve it just a little bit. That could open up him from being a I don't know, a 260 hitter to maybe a 280 hitter, and that's a huge difference. So that's something that's again really been helpful for the game and growing it and how to get value out of guys that maybe wasn't seen originally.
Right, no, definitely, and along the lines of talking metrics and biomechanics, as we mentioned previously, the whole how coding is becoming a big thing, in R, SQL, Python, and I know you've been very active during quarantine, in our previous conversations just about that. Can you give our listeners some, kind of general terms of how you have been trying to improve on your skills in those areas?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was when I went, I'll be honest, like I went through the interview process with the Orioles not having like a background. Uh, and I think they understood that and appreciated that. But for me over the break was, oh my God, all this time to do whatever we want, whether it's, being in the meetings, being present in those meetings, which have been awesome, whether it's developing skills. I think pretty early on when this started, I had a feeling in the back of my head, like, I'm probably going to be here for a while. Just
Yeah,
with the virus and how it's been so potent in this country, I thought, you know what, even if they have people at Bowie, which is where we're having our taxi squad practice,
right.
and they end up having a season, there's going to be a lot of us that aren't going. And so, particularly for the first 3 or 4 months, that's a lot of time, particularly if you're not employed, which luckily I was fortunate to be retained. That's a lot of either do nothing and just be content with that, or just say, you know what, I'm going to help improve my worth and then improve what I can do for whoever I'm working for. And even if you're unemployed, improve your chances to get employed somewhere else, whether it's in baseball or outside of baseball. So the first thing was I really worked on SQL and getting much better at that. It's not a particularly difficult language to learn. I think you just like anything, you just have to practice it a good amount. But to get the information that you need to get, particularly if you're not necessarily manipulating database in terms of information to it. If you're just pulling stuff and then running analysis on it, it's not that bad. It's just,
Mm,
spent about a month or two really getting good at that. Think I've gotten a good grasp on it. Obviously, a lot of room to learn. And then I did I'm finishing up a boot camp learning R, and that covers the basics of data manipulation, of exploratory analysis. We're getting into which have become really important, when you're developing processes at the minor league level and stuff like that. So just getting rid of that, getting good at that stuff. I've been studying for the CSCS exam for a while. I've taken past one section. Now I need to pass one more in about a month and a half when I retake it for the third time. That was just a foundation of the strength conditioning stuff, so I could at least have a conversation about it. Everything like that. I can't imagine having gone through this period, and luckily we've been really busy and never really been bored through all this. I
yeah, no,
can't
for sure.
imagine having to have just sat there and done nothing during quarantine, whether that's picking up a skill. If you didn't
Yeah.
learn anything during quarantine, everybody's going through something, and I get that, but that's a
Oh,
problem
yeah.
if you haven't picked up any sort of new skill during
Yeah, like
quarantine.
come on, man. Like, yeah, no, I'm there with you. Like,
Yeah.
I think you and I we think alike here and there, and I think that's the biggest thing. Is like when this first started, I thought, I left Lakeland March 14th or 15th, and then I was like, oh,
It was
I'll be
off.
back.
Yeah.
I'll be back in a few weeks. Like, no problem. We all, and then it was really, within 48 hours after March 13th, I was on a plane going home and and that was kind of it. And it was like I said, I thought it was gonna be 2, 3 weeks, but then as we started going along, realizing how the reports that just came out, it was like, wow, this is gonna be a long, long process. And but I never, like you said, you never got down about it. Like I turned it into a positive, and try to make the most out of it, and still making the most out of it, right? Because we are still in this situation. And I think using, like, I use data camp, Udemy, some other resources, and some of our listeners probably have used them as well, and I think they are helpful. Like, it's just getting a grasp of it, and then just taking the information you want to use, and then putting it into R, SQL, Python, because like you said, it's just another language. It's like, you know how to speak English, like for me, I learned Italian in high school, right? Just learning something else, and it takes time. You're not like, with these things, you're not going to learn them overnight. And I think sometimes, like, for me at first, it was like, I have to learn it if I want a job in baseball. But realistically, like, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I don't think it's a necessary skill. I think if anything, it just shows what range of things you're able to do. But what R is great for, as I'm learning, is if you have a massive database and you want to do some analysis on that, it's a lot more efficient than plugging that into Excel and trying to do that.
Right.
That could be a mess.
Yeah, yeah,
Doesn't mean you can't do it in Excel. I mean, that's if you can get really good at Excel, and particularly if you just SQL, that can a lot of that information and condense it so you don't have this massive database, but at least you can have one Excel file with a query that you run. That's going to be enough sometimes. It just depends on kind of what sort of stuff you're going to do. But if you're looking to learn something like R, the best way to do it is, yeah, get a baseline of what you need to do to actually do some analysis. But it's more just taking baseball data and just messing with, because that's how you're going to answer your own questions. That's how you're going to understand what you're trying to do better. Knowing that a lot of times, if you don't know the answer, if you just go somewhere on Google and type in, this certain thing in R that I want to do, normally there'll be an answer in like Stack Overflow, or then you realize, and I still have a long way to go with it. You realize it's not really that difficult. It's just intimidating getting off the ground. Um, and then you just kind of go from there and see what happens.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, and that's the way, I, like I said, like, there's so many good resources, and there's so many people all out there that are willing to help. I think it's awesome. And for me, like, I actually took part in a Python boot camp the other day through Sacred Heart University, and it was great to just have a conversation with people more about it and how it works. And in that 3 hours, like, I didn't learn it all, and that wasn't the plan to learn it all. It was more just get an idea of, like, how it works, just simple things like the logistics side of it. But I think, yeah, like you said, once you learn it, once you start, and then you just continue learning it, like, it will make more sense over time.
Yeah, just getting over that hump originally, that could be tough. And for me, it's this boot camp. So many boot camps out
Mhm.
really expensive, but
Yeah,
then
yeah,
this one that was being offered was being taught by somebody in a front office, actually. So he was doing it separately from his team responsibilities. And for me, it was like, you know what? I'm just going to throw some money down, because
yeah,
when I've tried to do this in the past on my own, it just hasn't worked. And if I put, literally my money where my mouth is, maybe that'll just at least push me over the hill a little bit more. And sure enough, that's what it did. So was it a cheap investment? No, but it got me to a point where I was really starting to learn it better, which through past attempts just hasn't been that productive. So money well spent. It's an investment at the end of the day.
yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And the course you're referring to, that's the guy with the Phillies, right?
Yeah, Michael Zahar, I think is how you pronounce his name, but he's their lead quantitative analyst in their sports performance department. Um, so that is, his camp was like a fraction of what a lot of data science boot camps are out there. So if you go and do it through a school and do a certificate, that could be a couple $1,000s.
Right, right.
He was doing it in a small group. He was doing it as an upstart company. And so because of that, it just wasn't that expensive. So I thought, you know what? This might be kind of the opportunity to do it. And I think it's paid off. And again, you're not paying a dumb amount of money for it, but it was somewhere to start. And it was a solid place for me to start learning it more. And yeah, it was awesome. So I think it's just doing your research, there's only so much time you could sit in front of a screen with something like Udemy and not just get impatient. But with him, he's done a very good job of taking us through everything, being patient, and just understanding that it's a very sort of slow learning process sometimes, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. No, I actually saw that course being offered, and I was interested in it, but like I had invested a lot elsewhere at the same time.
Yeah,
So they are expensive, but I think like you said, like there's with wanting to pursue a career in baseball, as I have learned, and I think you have learned, like investing that money somewhere where you know it's going to pay off, like it's definitely worth it. And I think, and I couldn't agree with you more. Like I think the things I invested, probably, just about same as you invested in, and to like into your professional development. I think it's gone a long way for me, and like obviously I have a long way to go, but using this time, having this time, due to obviously due to the circumstances, like none of us could have predicted this, but it's I think it's almost helped me in the long term because it allowed me to learn skills that I necessarily didn't have time for. And
right.
yeah,
I think I'm in the same boat. If we had a season as normal this year, I don't think I'm at where I am with sequel. I don't think I am where I'm at with R. Um, Even the on field coaching stuff that we've been doing, I don't think I'm at the same place with that. So I think, again, no clue what's going to happen with the season next year.
yeah,
To be honest, I'm just not sure how the typical minor league baseball model might work next year. But then again,
right.
I hope I'm wrong about that.
Yeah,
So, but it's just about being prepared, knowing that whether it's a normal season or not, it's still how do I provide the most insight and value to the team, whatever that looks like, and I'll be ready to go when that comes. I don't think I'm at the same place professionally in terms of skill knowledge uh, if we have a normal season than if the world happened the way it did this year.
right, right. No, I totally agree with you. Like for me, I'm actually going to be working at Iona College, in near my house. It's a school like 20 minutes away. I'm going to be their coordinator for video and player development, and like I'm very humbled for that opportunity. But at the same time, it's like, it's something I can't pass up because because I don't know what the circumstances are going to be for next year. So, I've been doing things on my end to put myself in a position that, when an opportunity opens up in the industry, I'm ready for that. And I think, so, kind of what we're saying aligns together is that, you work for a team right now and I don't, but, ultimately, if you keep working at it, you can get to where you want to go.
Yeah, it's just again every day knowing where you have room to improve, which is literally everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think when I was going through college and even early working with teams, I think there were some times where I didn't see it as a journey and it was more of a destination for me, which is not a great mindset to have in baseball because again, there's always something you can learn. But I think over time as I started to realize where the game was going, that I just didn't know everything, which I know sounds ridiculous, but sometimes when you're younger, you just have not the most coherent thoughts sometimes. So learned a lot from that and then just got better at knowing how to improve myself, however that looks.
Definitely. No, I totally agree. And I think brings up another good point, in terms of your professional development. You mentioned the CSCS test that you've been studying for, and for our listeners, I think if you don't mind, just briefly describing that and kind of why you decided to pursue an opportunity of getting that certification.
Yeah, so I'm still working on it.
Yeah, yeah,
It's been a long ass process, but I think a lot of the reason for that is I've worked out
yeah,
since middle school.
yeah,
Haven't worked with a trainer before because they're expensive, and didn't really have any sort of exercise science knowledge going through college or anything like that. So when you were studying for this exam, it could be potentially a year-long process if you're studying from scratch because the information that you're learning can be very scientific. It has a lot of little parts that they're going to ask you about on the exam because they want to see how well you know it. And so I guess to give sort of context, all of our strength conditioning coaches, I believe, have this certification. And in the strength conditioning world, particularly for pro athletes, it's kind of the gold standard. So let's say for Rapsodo, you pay $300 or $400 to go get Rapsodo certified in pitching. That's something that you could just scroll through the videos, not study, and you get the certification.
Correct,
This
correct.
is you have to pay for the exam, pay for the membership, pay for the study materials, study depending on how well you already knew that. Study this a lot,
Yeah,
and potentially have to take it multiple times, like I am, because I'm just didn't pass everything as I went.
yeah,
It's something on a resume that I think it's not going to necessarily get you a job, but I think it's going to stand out a lot, particularly if you're looking to coach maybe hitters or pitchers. I would love to be a pitching coach at some point, and so for me, it's having an understanding of the science behind why our body moves, why a muscle contracts, why it's better to get our torso going down the mound a little bit faster, getting into a brace position with your front leg as fast as possible. So why, on a scientific level, that makes sense and why that's something you should do. And even if I want to work with an athlete in the gym, knowing how to do a power clean, knowing how to correct a power clean if it's wrong, um, that can go far in where the game's going now, because it's not enough to just have experience. You need to have some sort of scientific knowledge with it. So for somebody that sucked at physics in high school and was really bad at a lot of science classes I took, this for me was, I want to kind of redeem myself for really struggling with scientific stuff in the past. And I think it could be a good resume thing, particularly if, baseball just, stops at some point for me down the road. I could go into personal training if I wanted to. I could do something with athlete development as well somewhere else. It was just something that I really wanted to do, had some conversations with some other people about. And it's not just the certification that you just get. You have to prepare like crazy for it. And, I'm taking the exam. Thankfully, it's only one of the two sections in
yeah,
about a month or two.
yeah,
If I had failed both sections second time, I probably would have called it a day. But
yeah,
luckily, I passed one of them. So that's kind of the exam. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about it. It's not a cheap process to study for it. It's not going to break the bank, but it's not cheap.
right.
But if you're looking to do, oh, should I do an on base U certification, or or study for the exam? I think the exam is going to go a lot further, just because you had to prepare a lot for it and you can do a lot with it. Not that on base U isn't important, but this, I think, goes a lot further and shows like, no, this is something I had to prepare like crazy for.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great point you bring up, because that was something next I was going to ask you. I was like, because I got on BSU certified, and that was an investment on my end for the hitting and pitching side, right? But for me, it was, when I got certified, you sit there, you watch a few video, you listen to, they have a conference, but unfortunately due to COVID, they did it virtually. So, and they have to give you manuals, so they basically go through both manuals in 2 days, 6 hours long, right? But for in your case with the exam that you've been studying for, like that's a year-long process or longer of studying. And yeah, like I totally agree with you now that you're explaining it more. And I think what you're doing is like it definitely will go, because anyone could say they're certified in on base U if they pay for it, right? But I think, yeah, like you said, what you're doing, it's going to go a long way, and you just keep grinding, and it's going to pay off for you.
Yeah, thank you, man. And it's definitely something that anybody could do, but if it's something you choose to do without any sort of uh, exercise science or strength conditioning background in terms of actually training athletes, it's a lot. Be
Yeah,
prepared for that. You're going to be expected to kind of know a lot of stuff back and forth. It's probably the hardest test, at least for me personally, that I've ever had to study for. And that's after taking the ACT, the GRE, the GMAT. Like, this was harder.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so it's just something to be aware of. But it definitely is something that if you can get that on your resume, not that it shows what work you can actually do, but this is the knowledge base I have. This is something that could set me apart. How many people that are not in strength conditioning departments have this? And I think you're going to find that it's not a lot.
yeah, yeah. No, no, I agree, and it's something relatively new, from my understanding. I could be wrong, but or that people are getting the CSC certification. Because a few years ago, I don't think a lot of people had or had it, in my knowledge, in baseball. But
I don't think so either. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like this brings up another good point, I think, to kind of wrap things up. Like I think from our conversation today, you and I, our listeners probably can tell, we both say it humbly. We work really hard to get to where, to help us in the position we are now, but also set us up for the future, right? And I think what gets overlooked sometimes is like the work-life balance. So, from my perspective, I like to share my story, and then, if you want to share your story briefly in general terms, like I think the work-life balance aspect is it's really important now than ever to think about, in terms of mental health or just physical well-being. And, I think when I first started a few summers ago in Greensboro was a learning experience, right? I was in ticket sales. I didn't know what I was getting into. Then really that experience really kickstarted everything for me, kind of understanding like, wow, like this is it. This is what it's like working in baseball. People they think working in sports is very glamorous. It is nice when you work for a team, but that's not the only thing, right? It's your job at the end of the day. And so I guess on that part, like you can kind of give us a brief in general terms as I did, like kind of how you try to manage it all, with trying to work as hard as you do.
Yeah, so I think what COVID's really taught me is that, yeah, this is a really a time sensitive job in the sense that if we had had a season this year, I'm basically on the road for 7 out of 12 months.
Yeah.
Um, that is hard, and you have a lot of families, and coaches definitely make it work, and players definitely make it work, but it's it's not a conventional lifestyle. I guess on the flip side, what's nice is you have 5 months off,
Yeah.
so that's nice.
Yeah.
But for 7 months out of the year, you're doing a lot, and you don't get paid well. And I guess my challenge to you is when I was, or for anybody, when I was going through the internship process, I was constantly wondering, even though I was enjoying the work and working hard at it, is this worth it? Is it worth it for the minimum wage? Is it worth it for the constant hours of running around, just making sure that you're doing your job to the best of your abilities? It's a question you really have to ask yourself, in the sense that, is this something that I really enjoy, makes me happy? Do I not just makes me happy, but do I find purpose in it?
Right.
Do I look forward to learning something new every day? Because if you could go opt for another job that might pay double, you need to ask yourself that question, because at the end of the day, most of us aren't going to be around more than 100 years. Not to get philosophical, but
No, no, I
something to
mean,
think about.
yeah.
That, what am I really going to be able to look back and say, this is what I enjoyed doing, or at least I took a really big risk to do it. I think a lot of people are afraid to take that risk, but there's also a lot of people that don't know what they want to do for a career, and they just say, I want financial security that's going to buy me freedom. Yeah, I want that too. I think everybody wants that.
Yeah.
That's what money does ultimately, and money also can buy happiness, in the sense that if you give it to others and spend it on others, yeah, then it can really sort of help you be a better person. But what COVID's really taught me, I think, going back, is that you can have this career and still have a really strong social circle, but you have to be the one reaching out to people. You have to be the one constantly working at your friendships. And if it's not going to be reciprocated, then it's not worth it. But a lot of times you're going to be the one that's going to have to do it. And I think for me, particularly when I was younger, I was a pretty introverted kid. And so for me, I kind of expected people just, hey, if they wanted to hang out with me, or if they cared, they'd be the one reaching out. You can't think that way. And COVID has really taught me that. I've reached out to so many different people during this, and it's rekindled some friendships. It's started some new ones. I mean, I didn't know you before COVID, and now
Yeah.
doing this, like, that's awesome.
Yeah. No, it's great. No, for sure.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I think my biggest challenge is, yeah, this is going to take a lot out of you as a career, in terms of you're going to have to make some sacrifices. But I guess my question is, do you see those sacrifices as a negative? Do you have people in your life that are going to support that sacrifice that you're making, realizing how important that sacrifice is to you? And I think another thing to be aware of, and this is something that I'm having to be aware of too, is that, as we mentioned earlier in the call, the job cycle for the baseball world seems like it's going to be a little bit delayed, at least for a year, if not maybe longer.
Yeah.
So if you have to go in another direction for a little bit, that's fine. Like, that's, build your skills up however you can. It doesn't have to be in baseball. Kudos to you if it is, however that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the in-person job experience is going to change.
Right.
And You're seeing that with people working from home. I mean, I'm working from home every day. My parents are working from home every day. In-store businesses like bars, for example, that rely on people working in the store or the storefront, that doesn't work right now.
Right.
So the job market is really going to change. So whether that's, for example, like sports betting is becoming really big. So if you could get a job in sports gambling that actually forces you to build a lot of models sometimes until the baseball job market opens again, like that's a really good opportunity. And so I would say just because the job opportunities are a lot smaller potentially does not mean that your career in this sport ends. It's that for a year or two, you might just need to go in another direction until playing games, particularly at the minor league level, is safe again. So long-winded answer, but there's a
No,
lot of
no.
ways to do
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
it seems like it can be something that could bring you down, but just accept the fact that you are not necessarily getting a job because somebody was a better candidate. It's that the world stopped.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's just something just to be aware of for anybody that's sort of doubting themselves right now, because I've doubted myself so many times.
Yeah.
That was a me thing. This is a millions of people getting sick thing
Yeah.
now. Just something to keep in perspective, whether, being aware of improving your relationships with people, improving your relationships with your family. Make that number one, constantly trying to improve yourself, having fun when you have off time. Like no one's really doing anything right now in terms of living their life in a way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
find ways to live your life and improve yourself. It just might look a little bit different.
Yeah, no, and that's a fantastic answer, and I can definitely agree to a lot of points that you're saying too. Like, when I was younger, my friends, it was like, they always, I expected they reach out to me, but that, you know, as we got older, that happened to not be the case. I'm like, why are they not reaching out? Why are they not reaching? But then I realized, I have to do that. I have to take initiative, and like I did that, and it really opened a lot of doors with a lot of other people. And again, like, we didn't know of each other in the beginning of quarantine. I knew of you through a friend, but I didn't know you. Like, now we talk, we have communicated with each other. And I think it's awesome. Like, and that's what has really helped during this time. And same thing, like you mentioned, like I've been able to connect with people back from college, even though I graduated a year ago, and just maintaining those relationships because they are just as important as people you work with, your family, etc. And yeah, no, I just want to thank you again for hopping on this call today. And I think you provide our listeners with a lot of valuable tools, that they can work on or just get a better idea of, in terms of moving forward. And I really appreciate having you on today, Eli.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. This was a lot of fun. And if any of your listeners ever just want somebody to talk to or to pick the brain of, and obviously I'll pick their brains too, because again,
Yeah, of course.
I don't know close to anything.
Yeah.
Um, that's what I'd love to do. So find me on LinkedIn. I can give out phone number from there. Um, this is just a really cool industry, and so for people really kind of doubting things right now, let's talk about it. I'm more than happy to have you vent about it, kind of walk through that process, because this isn't easy right now. And
100%.
let's be here for each other. This group that you've put on with the other guys seems like just such a cool thing. And yeah, I'd love to be of help in any place possible, because I know that there have been people in my life that I don't know if I'd be here without their help. So I want to pay it forward. If I could play even a
Mm.
0.0001% part in you getting in this industry and staying in this industry, or you pushing along to the next step in your career, like that's what working in baseball is all about. It's helping other people, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, no, thank you again, and I appreciate the kind words and the kind words to our listeners. But yeah, hopefully we'll have you back on soon again. And this was great. I had a blast, and it was great just talking baseball and talking more about the industry.
Me too, Ryan. Thanks again, and keep staying safe. And just let me know whatever you need help with. I'm more than happy to chip in one way or another.
Awesome, thank you, Eli.
All right, peace, man. Have a good one.
I'm Gifting Gope, Major League Baseball player. Please support international baseball by subscribing to CBO TV.